What's happening, guys? Welcome into another boxing breakdown and prediction show for this weekend's Super Middleweight clash over in Glendale, Arizona, between David Benavidez and David Lemieux, live over on Showtime. So let's get into it now. David Benavidez comes into this one as the absolutely colossal minus 2,500 favourite here. You know, bookmakers not messing around there. And at those kind of odds, I actually believe there's a small bit of value back in the underdog in this one. You know, you would look at David Lemieux's, overall record, his record, over his last few fights as well. And, on the surface, probably wouldn't be all that impressed. Recent wins against, David Zagara, Francine Tetu, journeyman basically. And that Zagara fight took place at a Holiday Inn as well. So you would imagine, look, David Lemieux has obviously seen better days, in the sport as a whole. He's not the fighter maybe he once was. And, even if he was the fighter in his prime, Benavidez is, a few levels above Lemieux in terms of overall boxing ability. So, he's got far more facets, wrinkles to his game overall. But, look, here's the catch. David Lemieux is still arguably in his fighting prime right now in terms of body. He's only 33 years of age. And Benavidez really needs to watch himself here because Lemieux is definitely not a guy you want to be taking lightly this weekend. Personally, I kind of grade power into three different levels in boxing. You've got that, kind of Triple G, Anthony Joshua, George Foreman kind of thudding power, almost kind of blunt force trauma type power where, no matter where those guys hit you, it's going to hurt, deconstructing type of power, it breaks you down almost like a constant pile driver from the outside, through sheer force alone, it kind of breaks down your walls of defense. And obviously that's pretty hardcore. But the next type of power for me is possibly a step up from that. That's the kind of power where you're talking about kind of, clean electric type power, fast. And what I mean by that is, think Canelo, think Naoya Inoue as well, where, they mightn't have the same level of kind of concussive raw power as the guys mentioned, previously. But if they catch you right, if they catch you clean, think guys like Andy Lee as well, where if he catches you through the guard, you're going to sleep, no question. So this level of power, instead of breaking you down consistently over time, will, often look to find that gap, find that perfect opening, so to speak. Again, think Canelo versus James Kirkland, think Andy Lee versus John Jackson as well. And, if these guys catch you clean, you're going to bye-bye town, no question. So, but to me, for those two levels of power, there's a level of power even above those two, in my opinion. It's that kind of, Marty McFly, jump on your DeLorean and wake up in 1986 type of power. It's just sheer and utter destruction. And it's not even destruction, in fairness. It's almost like these guys are having an outer body experience when they get hit. The eyes are open, but they've completely left the building. You think of guys like Julian Jackson, in his fight against Terry Norris, where we caught him back in the day, think Deontay Wilder versus Arthur Spilka as well more recently, where that type of power where boys are just, flatlining on the ground. And that is what we're talking about when we talk about David Lemieux. His type of power is absolute grade A. Have the emergency services on standby. Because he's absolutely ferocious in there, especially that left hook of his. And if you need proof of how hard this guy hits, just go back and revisit the Curtis Stevens fight. Stevens was a puncher himself, but when Lemieux connected with him against the ropes, it was scary stuff. The ref was talking him on the floor because his eyes were actually open, as we said, but there was no one home. He didn't have a clue where he was. So this is a potential banana skin for David Benavidez this weekend, especially if he expects to simply go in there and trade bombs with David Lemieux in this one, because that's a risky strategy. I was on David Lemieux when he fought Triple G, like all those years ago for small units. Basically, anytime I assume Lemieux's going to be involved in some kind of firefight, especially at huge underdog prices, I'm more than happy to come in and back him for small stakes. Triple G up to that point had been leaving a ton of bodies in his wake, just, creating a streak through the middleweight division. He'd absolutely ran through guys like Matthew Macklin, Daniel Gill, Marco Antonio Rubio, Willie Monroe Jr., and so on. And the expectation going into that fight was, he'd pretty much do the same against David Lemieux as well. I didn't need any more of an invitation than that to get to the window. I can't remember the odds exactly, as it's about 7 years ago now, that fight, but they were absolutely huge for a Lemieux knockout. Triple G massive favourite in that one. And as hard as Triple G is, Obviously, we know how good Triple G's chin is. As I said, anytime you want to give me massive odds on anybody taking David Lemieux's type of power in a firefight, I'll be more than ready to, shake their hand, no problem. And, what did Triple G do in that fight? He came out, started the box, started to systematically break Lemieux down from the outside with his jab. He busted up Lemieux's whole face in that fight from the outside. And, this whole firefight talk before that fight took place, two guys who were basically going to engage in all-out war, which is what most people expect to happen, obviously. That simply never took place. Triple G used his superior ring IQ, used it to break down, eventually stop Lemieux in that one from the outside. And that's always been Lemieux's main issue, in the boxing game. He can be outthought in there. He's very susceptible to high-level boxers. Marco Antonio Rubio implemented a great game plan against him all those years ago, kind of weathered that early storm, came on strong late. Triple G, as we said as well, didn't want to go out there, get reckless. He just simply boxed from the outside, broke him down, and then closed the show in the mid to late rounds. And, Billy Joe Saunders as well absolutely embarrassed him in front of his home crowd in Quebec. A lot of people expected that to be a competitive fight as well, and Saunders barely broke a sweat in that fight. Very, very slick performance from the British fighter in that one. And, that's the question for me. Put Lemieux in there with a high-level boxer and you'll really start to see his limitations as a fighter. But, put him in there against the likes of a Spike O'Sullivan. And, remember, O'Sullivan's a tough guy. He was trading some huge shots against Jaime Munguia last year in a war. Another fighter who's supposed to be one of the biggest punchers at middleweight. And, Lemieux simply iced him inside a round. So, has that power carried to 168 for Lemieux? It is hard to say categorically right now. But, one thing's for sure, we're certainly going to find out on Saturday night. As David Benavidez, he's not the most defensively blessed fighter in there. And he's never been hit as hard. He's sparred some guys who hit hard, but he's never been hit as hard in a fight as what Lemieux has in that left hook. But he does have a jab. He can make this fight look fairly easy, in my opinion, if he employs that Triple G game plan. Look to break David Lemieux down from the outside, potentially then finish him in the mid to late rounds, when he's all busted up. But my only concern for Benavidez in this one is the fact that, look, when he gets opponents hurting there, like Jalen Love, Anthony Durrell, and so on, he tends to open up with those flurries of combinations. He jumps on them. He's got that finisher's instinct in fights. And while that's normally a good thing, if Lemieux can catch him cold coming in here, there's a possibility of an upset. So I'm actually going to take two bets in this fight for this weekend that I like. I've already bet them. Firstly, I'm going to take a flyer on David Lemieux to win in rounds 1 to 4 at a colossal plus 3,300 price tag. Absolutely huge price, as I think it's going to be a very energetic fight early. I do expect Lemieux to set, a kind of frenetic pace in there. But the bet I expect to land, kind of more often from a percentage viewpoint is David Benavidez to win in round 7 to 12, which is going off at a pretty healthy plus 275 as well. If Benavidez is smart in there, he'll look to copy that Triple G playbook. He looked to break Lemieux down from the outside first before jumping in late on and then opening up and finishing Lemieux with combinations. So I'm going to have some pizza money on David Lemieux to win in rounds 1 to 4, a massive plus 3,300. Lemieux's always got a puncher's chance with a guy who cracks as hard as he does. But for the purposes of the main play for this video, we're going to take David Benavidez to win in round 7 to 12. At plus 275 on Saturday, as I think he likely breaks down Lemieux from the outside and stops him late in this one. So that's going to do it from me. That'll wrap things up for this episode. As always, leave us your thoughts in the comment section below, and you can also catch me over on Twitter at thesportswolf83 and at my handicapper page, Kevin Dolan, over at WagerTalk. As always, thanks for listening. Till next time, Slán